Okay.
Let me test the audio a little bit. Looks good. Testing testicles. Say something.
Let's see.
Looks
Trying to
good.
make sure I got some sort of charge down here. There we go. There we go.
All right.
Yes,
Cool.
computer. I hear you.
Just let me know when you're set up.
Oh, I'm pretty set up. This is probably about as set up as I'm going to be able to get. Oh my god, I hate this computer. You know what? Fuck it. I got enough charge.
Cool. All right. Well, let's jump right
All right.
in. Episode 5, Tower Neutron Show with Sebastian. Uh, Thanks for coming on the show, Sebastian.
No, it's no problem, man. Thank you for having me.
So this episode 5, the last 4 episodes have been, like I mentioned earlier, have been heavily kind of politically focused. We've talked about technology and culture, all this kind of stuff. But another passion of mine is anything and all things nerdy and world building. And so I've heard that you are a DM and that you've kind of
Yes, I am.
crafted this universe. And so I'm here to really just I want to hear all about it, man. I love it. So like, first of all, tell me how long is this world being? How long has it been building? How long have you been actively building this world?
This campaign takes part of basically a course of like about 3 campaigns. This is the third part of the campaign, which we decided to use the Taldore setting from Critical Role.
Okay.
And the first one was, when I first started getting into D&D, and it was created by my friend Mike, and he was like, you know what, I'm done doing this. One of y'all take over.
Right.
So when we took over, it was a little wonky because one, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I just grabbed a Forgotten Realms book and I was like, okay, this is some of the lore. This is something I can work with.
Right.
Um, that campaign started off with the snake god Dindar basically just screwing everything up and wanting to bring on a Yuan-Ti, I guess theological tyranny.
Okay.
And that segued into, I guess, a mini campaign, a module of sorts.
Right.
After they defeated that big baddie, which that one was pretty short because I didn't know how to work off of it because, like I said, I just started it.
Okay. So I guess I may pause for a second because like what I'm hoping to do with this is really introduce a lot of people who have kind of no idea what or they may know what D&D is just like as a concept, but they've never really seen it. So I kind of want to like really make it like a beginner friendly kind of thing. So I'm curious. So one thing I've kind of talked about is how if you're wanting to kind of get into D&D, it's actually very easy to get into. It's really just kind of like making a story with friends. Of course, you can get into all the math and stuff, and then really, yeah,
I love that. 5e, from what I've understood, because I picked up some of the 3.5 books. 3.5 was very heavily focused in customization. It scared people away, and 5e, I think, is a good beginning ground where it can be as customizable as you want to. Plain and simple.
Right. So whenever I've played around with them, what I've actually not even used the official D&D rulebook or the official D&D universe. So what I did, for example, is I just said, "Hey, I like Pokemon. These people like Pokemon. Let's jump in and just create our own Pokemon story." Or same with Elder Scrolls and some other things. So it sounds like you're kind of more into the explicit D&D universe with some of the more explicit kind of D&D rules. Is that accurate?
At first it was because I wanted to get an accurate basis of what the game was, but now I've started branching out into creating like my own armors, own creatures and characters and bad guys. It's not your standard, the Lich came in and is, just here to fuck everything up.
Right. So I guess that's one thing that I want to kind of get out in general is that there is a larger world of role playing that transcends the D&D rules in the D&D universe, but of course that is a great place to start because it kind of has it all kind of built for you. There's already a culture around it, and like you're saying, you can then expand upon that, create your own characters. Yeah. So let's go back to, you said some of the early storylines. You said there was this snake god that was kind of posed as the main villain here.
Yeah, that's what our friend Mike built it up as. Because me, I started off as a player character,
Right.
and I really liked Rangers and whatnot. And I was your typical, dark elf ranger, but I wasn't, just Drist all the time
Right.
from the Forgotten Realms books. It
Right.
was just, like I really like dark elves because of Elder Scrolls and whatnot.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
And we had our friend Connor and Matthew playing with us, and Matthew's been playing since the dawn of time, so
Yeah.
he knew how to min-max. He knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Me and Connor were like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Right.
I was trying to focus on the book and like, okay, this is how I play.
Right.
But then I started realizing it wasn't about the numbers. It was about me playing a character that could focus on like an aspect or actually have its own story.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all about the story. Yeah, a lot of times as gamers, we get kind of really sucked into the stats and like this kind of competitive element and whatnot. But then you realize, of course, for kind of like tabletop role play, it's a lot about the story. It's a lot about connecting with your character and connecting with the universe.
Yeah, and that's something that I try to tell my players now. All this time later, because I've been able to experience several different characters. I've had paladins, warlocks, a paladin warlock, rangers, sorcerers, and all that. And they're each of them have an aspect of yourself.
Absolutely.
But each one focuses it differently.
On one aspect of yourself, I absolutely see that. Yep.
Yeah, like a lot of my characters are mainly like carefree and like I just want to explore and be an adventurer and
right. So that's
not naive.
That part is common, yeah. So
yeah,
that part's
they
common.
Have that part in common, but some of them are very stoic, some are very talkative, some of them just want to be that asshole.
Right. And that sounds really fun. Like I think that's the same kind of thing that draws people to kind of like theater and draws people to acting, as well as storytelling in general, whether it be written or whatnot. Is that yeah, you get to play a character, you get to have fun. I mean, that's absolutely what it is.
Oh yeah, and it depends on what aspect you want to focus on and like what kind of group you're with as well. Because if you have a bunch of rule lawyers, it can be fun, but then it depends on like if you're there to like play it by a numbers game and not by a story-driven game.
Yeah, and I always lean more towards the story-driven because I think that's easier for new people to jump into. It's just kind of like more. I think it's just more. It flows more intuitive. Of course, I see why people like the numbers, but I'm not. In that kind of scenario, I'm not really a numbers guy myself.
Me too. I think numbers becomes more important in I guess layered levels because that's when you're fighting to keep that character as a mainstay, not have them constantly rezzed or like I need healing all the time. So how many life points do I have? And just all these numbers just to keep them alive.
Yeah.
But something that I think brings all people to the table is that you don't have to be you in this, but you can still explore different aspects of yourself.
Right.
In different morals and everything. You want to be a murder hobo? Be a murder hobo.
So,
if you want to be, the pious, scholar or something, go be that.
So one thing I was thinking about, you kind of mentioned some like how stats may come into play, especially in combat. So whenever I actually did play before I started my own kind of deals, my own more story-driven things. I played an explicit kind of campaign with some experienced people, DMs, and I just didn't really like the combat at all. Like I wanted to just kind of overhaul the entire way that combat is done. I wanted to essentially just kind of, again, I like to think about it like, hey, we're just a bunch of creative people sitting together, kind of creating a story together. So like whenever we have a fight scene, it's almost like we're writing a movie and we say, hey, what do we think would happen? Like, here's a character who's really agile. They'd probably make the first move and this would probably happen. And maybe there might be like a time for like a dice roll if there is something that's up in the air and everyone's like, well, it could go this way, it could go that way. Who really cares? Flip a coin. But I think that that was my style. That was what I was thinking as far as how combat may go.
Yeah, like I get what you're saying with the combat because sometimes it's just all these numbers as a DM. As a DM now, it's all these numbers get in the way sometimes, and sometimes I'll just be like, okay, I'm going to go left or right, or it's like, okay, just tell me where your characters are, and whoever's closest, I'll work that way out.
Right.
Or something to that degree.
Yeah, because
And
it really does slow it down. It feels like it's very like especially when it's sequential and you've got these moves and all this kind of stuff. And like to be honest, like nowadays the fact that we have video games have come as far as they are. If you're really interested in the combat element, I think that like that would be the direction to go. So like
yeah,
what it really leaves for traditional tabletop is to focus on the story and to focus on the characters like we've been talking about.
yeah, and that's something I've been focusing on with this. Yeah, third or fourth campaign. I've lost track so many times.
Right.
In this third or fourth campaign, this is where I've started refining that
Right.
for me
Right.
as a DM. And so far, like it's a little clunky still, but it's gotten more interesting for the players from what I can tell because they're not sitting there going like, okay, I gotta wait my turn. They're sitting there going like, what can I do next?
Right. Right. They're
And
actually thinking. They actually have something to think about. Yeah.
yeah, and
Plan.
like last night, I decided to bring in an old 3.5 book I picked up from McKay's, and it's
Hey,
Weapons
that's
of
what's up.
Legacy.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Let's make the world a little bit more rich. Like, there's these legendary weapons, and they're just dotted throughout the world. And how do you get them?
That's really cool. I like that.
And there's a lot of stuff in 3.5 that's not in 5e. So, you know, we kind of homebrew some of the stuff, like
Right.
Flatfoot, that's not in there.
Yeah, that's what you got to do. Yeah,
I
you got to
can't even.
customize it. One thing
Yeah.
one thing I kind of wanted to do is because I'm not even very familiar myself, and I assume anyone who listens will probably not be as well. So I'm assuming that the D&D universe, I'm assuming that there is an explicit lore, right? There is like an explicit like here, like it takes place in this continent. Like there's these races, they live here. Is it kind of that way?
Sorta.
Or to
That,
what
that
extent do you go out of some kind of canon universe, or to what extent do you kind of just build your own whatever?
well, at first, for me, I decided to go with the Tal'Dorei campaign because I wanted to learn world building a little bit better
Right.
than my previous one because the previous campaign was just the world's on fire. I hope you can fix it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So not too much context. You just kind of throw it in the middle of this shitstorm, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it was just a shitstorm from beginning to end, but it was fun for them,
Yeah.
except for a few encounters, which we can get to that later if you want.
But
That
you,
was me experimenting, so that was a
yeah.
little rough on them.
You know, I
Um,
think one thing that's always funny is like whenever I first played a campaign and I was just a player character or whatnot, all I wanted to do was like I literally wanted to like find a library inside of the universe and just like use that as a way to just ask infinite questions about what's going on. I just want to be like, that's all I want
that's
to do.
actually that's actually one of the great things about a campaign setting, and I can't stress it enough for people who want to learn like world building on a better scale is to observe how a campaign book, a campaign setting,
Yeah.
lays out the world for you. Like with the Tal'Dorei campaign from Matthew Mercer, he has this place called the Cobalt Reserve, and it's like this massive library that a bunch of monks run. You can't take any information out, but you can come in with paper, pen, write down all your notes and stuff, and leave.
That's really cool.
And pretty much, if you ask a question, it's like, okay, well, is there an artifact here that could hold this? And sometimes you gotta like wing it, but that's the fun of it. You
Exactly.
get to choose where that's gonna be.
Yeah.
And if they're like, well, okay, why? You gotta be like, well, let me get back to you. And that's
Yeah.
the one thing that I've learned is don't say I don't know, because if the DM doesn't know,
Then no one knows.
there's a problem.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely seems to be. So that's another point I wanted to make is that another approach and a way that I wanted to kind of craft do it differently was not to necessarily have so much pressure on one DM, but basically just let everyone in the group kind of be a creative component and kind of talk together. And of course, you could have someone who kind of guides it and kind of centers it. But this whole idea of who makes decisions of like who does it. Of course, it's partially chance, but that's one thing I thought to do. I don't know if you've ever experimented or heard about that.
Yeah, we do a similar thing, except I mean I'm still the DM, but I'm like I want you to give me a backstory of your character. Like, tell me what's their goals, what's happened to them in their life, like what's going on, and I'll try to fill in the gap and make something out of it. That way, you've made a part of the world yourself,
You're right.
and we can explore that.
And we work together,
Like,
meet in the middle. Yeah, absolutely.
like last night, for instance, we have a warlock. Her name's Hecate. She's heavy into like Greek mythology and stuff.
Yeah, that's what's
And
up.
she's like an Asimir. I think that's how you pronounce it. An Asimir, and she has a sword that talks to her. It's a sword of vengeance, and then that's just one of the home rules that I've had. I'm like, you know what? It's a sword of vengeance that's possessed with a soul that's vengeful. Why not make it talk? So I let one of the other players be the voice of that sword, and I'm
Right.
like, be an annoying asshole that always wants to fight, pretty much.
Let me at him.
It pretty much, except it's her boyfriend that gets to be the asshole. So
See that's what
that
it's all
makes it
about.
even.
It's all about like again being able to express yourself, and again like being able to experience that with other people and just have that real experience. That sounds really cool. Like those definitely seem to be some of the highlights for me as far as why I want to play is like to explore and kind of flesh out the world, and also to play this character and express myself. Yeah, and
Yeah,
those to me some of the core components for sure.
like a sentient item always makes things a little bit more interesting. But like I was saying, she has this whole thing where she's exiled by her family, and her family pretty much helps run a theocracy. And her sister shows up, who's a blood cleric, and pretty much, she can control people by inflicting harm on herself and then using the blood to control said person.
Damn, that's wild.
Well, her sister basically is like looking to expand her war front, and her parents are like, come on home. We want you to join. We found out you started up this nice little upstart region. You can join us, or we can just burn it to the ground.
Oh damn,
Yeah.
it's pretty
So,
intense.
think of Zula from Avatar.
I was actually just thinking, like I was actually just thinking about Avatar, like not even consciously, I didn't consciously hear something you said and think about Avatar, but I was just like kind of latently think. I think what happened was whenever you said the blood thing, and I was thinking about
Yeah.
I was thinking about blood bending, and that's probably
Yeah.
how the idea got in my head. So
That's essentially what it is. It's just blood bending, and this is except it's a Zula, so
that
there's no
sounds
fire.
incredibly fucked. That sounds terrifying. Azula as a bloodbender.
It is because one of our other players, my girlfriend, she plays a Tabaxi artificer wizard, and she has a ring. And this ring has a shadow demon attached to it, so it's kind of like not her familiar, but kind of like a friend.
Right.
And she can ask it questions. It won't respond to anyone else except her because, well, it doesn't care about them. Well, I didn't let her know. I like keeping pieces of things like that from players and let them find it out later. And it has a corruption system to it.
Right.
Well, she didn't like how, we'll just call her Azula from now on because I forgot the name. I have it written down in my notes. It's Erinys. Yeah, Erinys. The name of the Azula character is Erinys. She didn't like how Erinys was talking to her because Erinys basically said, "Shut up, fuck off. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to my sister."
Damn.
Yeah. Well, she's like, "I'm gonna make some tea." Well, my girlfriend's character's making tea, and then all of a sudden, I was like, "Make a wisdom save." She's like, "Why?" I'm like, "Just do it." Fails it. I was like, "You take the teapot and you literally chuck it, the scalding hot tea, onto this woman." Well, Aries didn't like that, did her blood puppet thing, and was going to make her walk out the like third or fourth story window.
Yeah.
And then there was like this confrontation between our player character Hecate and her sister in game, and it seemed to really flesh it out, and it fleshed out this idea that this is not a good person and not willing to be a good person.
Interesting. So that makes me think of a couple things. It makes me think of like number one, like the way you're describing that and the way I imagine these things actually play out. I think that really attests to the fact that like the story kind of tells itself. These characters, like of course the characters that are there that you're actually playing come to life, but these like NPCs or whatever that you would, as you would call it, they seem to kind of take a life of their own, and like they become real and whatnot. It seems very interesting that how that kind of happens.
I think that's a very crucial part to also making world building is the DM bringing NPCs to life, and whether that's you acting out the voices or you simply stating with intent what they're doing.
Right.
And there's no right way to DM.
Right.
As long as everyone's having a good time, there's no right way.
I agree.
So if you're going to sit there and you're going to voice act all of them, more power to you. If you're going to sit there and you're going to literally describe to me the detail in how they tap their finger because they're agitated, that they just have boiling hot water poured on their head, perfect. I don't care.
Right.
You're just there to tell me what's happening, how it's happening, and why it's happening, and I'm supposed to respond.
Right.
And when you bring life into these NPCs, it really brings life to the world because it makes you think this person's in a position of power. I can't even begin to fathom what it's like there.
Exactly. Yeah, you really, really have to stretch your imagination sometimes, and sometimes it just hits its limits.
Well, they didn't seem to like really start grasping it, and I was like, okay, well, my player character, Hecate, she is grasping it because this is her story. She knows her story. She knows her sister. The other player characters are just like, we don't know who this person is. So I drop hints like, it's like, oh, well, we took over the Jorhassian Empire. We had to raise a few villages and, destroy their crops and cut off their food supply.
Right.
But I see that, you're picking up the slack and taking in their refugees anyways.
Interesting.
And it's just like, oh crap, that's why our port city is getting so many people now.
See, that's what the kind of stuff that I love is definitely like what takes place is like the lore, the historical context, the political context, like all these characters. It's like, I mean, it's the kind of shit that really draws you in, like Game of Thrones, for example. It's just like so many players and so many personalities and all this shit's playing out, and it just has you on the edge of your seat. So it's like next level to be like right there in the action, dictating the action, creating the story. It just sounds like the next level of engaging.
And that's the key component, engaging your audience, and you too are the audience. If it's not exciting to the DM, then it's not going to be exciting to your player characters.
Exactly.
I keep saying player characters. I should say party, but anyways, same difference.
All the same, yeah.
Yeah, you have to really engage everyone, and a lot of it can be in tone of voice and volume.
Yeah.
And that's something I really had to learn because I was like, okay, I can say everything at the same volume, or I can talk real quiet and then bring it in.
Right.
Because they're like, okay, I gotta focus because I can't really hear them, and then all of a sudden, bam! It catches their attention more. It draws them in. And
see,
so, like,
yeah, that's kind of like
you gotta kind of learn how to manipulate people.
Yeah, that reminds me of another thing too, which is like this kind of lost art of just auditory storytelling. We have movies, we have books, but like we really have almost lost like what is that ancient, like how it all started, which is just word of mouth, like just storytelling. Like how can you tell this story? How can you bring people into the place just by what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think that's a part that I actually enjoy the most. It's like, how can I capture your attention with just my voice?
Right.
We have a stack of books here. Yeah, that's great. But how can I make sure you feel this is real? You can suspend your suspend disbelief to feel like this is real and this matters for just a few hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you do that, it's like capturing lightning in a bottle because you have so much fun and you believe it, and if everyone even has that feeling of tension and it feels like stress, at the end of the day, everyone's like, man, that was a great session. Oh, I had so much fun.
Yeah, it's real,
it's like
man.
You just went to the movies, but you had a little bit more because you got to be a part of it.
Like a dream, literally like a dream where you actually were in it. You're actually empathetically putting yourself in that character's shoes and making it come to life. Yeah, the brain has immense power to do such things for sure.
Oh, definitely. I think that's really what draws me to D&D because like at one point, yeah, I had to take a break because we were just going campaign to campaign to campaign. And
Right.
it's like, okay, hang on, I
You're
gotta
you're
take a
living
breather.
a second life, right? You're just like living. You're like neglecting real world, but for like D&D world.
Oh yeah, pretty much. It was like, okay, I go to work. I have a boring life. I go home, I make some props, and then I sit down and I write. And I got to make this other world and like literally live like 15 different lives because that's all my NPCs that are mainstays. And then I got to think that out, and it's bad.
So
So sometimes you got to take a breather, and that's good.
So I want to bring something up, which is that like right now in the modern world, yes, you can only get so sucked into a campaign because you have this normal life to live, so to speak. But for example, there are some people out there who make a living off of telling stories and crafting these kind of things, which I think would be fantastic. But I also want to say that I think moving forward, as society advances, as we kind of like work becomes less and whatnot, we find ourselves living in, I don't know, some kind of VR world. That's
Yeah.
that may be the day to day. It's like, I'm gonna go play this character, and I'm gonna build this world, and I'm gonna do this fun thing, and you can just let it run wild because that's what you said. It's fun. Like, life is boring a lot of times. This gives us a place to just let it run free.
It's a good escape. And I honestly think that the theater of mind is a healthier escape than like my PS4. I mean, I'm not downing video games at all, but I feel something more whenever I'm able to sit there with friends,
Yeah,
describe a world, and
yeah.
play out these situations with
Yeah.
them.
Well, it's because you're number one, you're creating it. Number two, you're sitting there in real life with people. Like, those are just some elements right there. That definitely helps it to kind of have more to it.
Yeah, it's just there's so much more to it than just pen, paper, dice.
Yeah.
It, but I mean, if you want it to be pen, paper, dice, that's fine too. As long as you are enjoying it, and as long as you can get into it.
Yeah, I definitely
Uh,
want to. That's a big thing that I want to do. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I really want to I want to popularize it. I want to popularize role playing in general. I want to make it. I want to make it beginner friendly. I want to make it, because as we see, it's so interesting. It's so fun. It has so much to it. There's so much potential. And like, one thing I wanted to go back to is that you talked about how like there was one of the players had like this other character, and it made me think about how like uh, it can function as like almost like a real world therapy, or like a real, like, help you grow as a person, because you're actually, I mean, that's how we grow, is through experience. And so like, whenever you read a book and you kind of identify with the character and you kind of go through this experience with them, you're actually growing, you're actually learning, you're actually thinking about it, and so it's very, very real in that sense.
yeah, in a prime example, and it's not mean in any way. My girlfriend, she has a huge like naivety problem. She wants to see the good in everyone,
Right.
and she she wanted to like make a character that's a bit of a charlatan, has more of a backbone and whatnot. Not saying she doesn't. She's just very,
But it was an opportunity for her
neat.
to kind of step into that. It's an opportunity for her to like say, "Hey, this is a projection of who I want to work towards."
Yeah, I want to work towards. And then her character, she kept having that trouble, and she kept. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. Uh,
That's
she
all good.
kept having this trouble on, being that character that she wanted, and she kept telling me, "It's like I just don't know what to do." And I didn't even plan this. I already had, that ring already just sitting there, and her character is very attracted to shiny things because cat.
Right.
Um, she's a cat person, Tabaxi. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. 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 I've had characters that I play with that had that same kind of thing. Like, ooh, I want that.
Well,
Right.
she got this ring, and the Shadow Demon showed up, and I'm a big Musketeers fan, so I named it Porthos.
Okay.
And Porthos has been just answering questions, biding his time, not really doing anything malicious, and that's where the corruption system came in. She really looked up to this demon and as a way of free expression, doing as they wish.
Right.
And I can't remember what the conversation was, but I remember the line that I said, and she like asked him like, why do you do what you do? And he's like, I just tip my hat as I please. And she's just looked at me like, what? Like, it resonated with her. And after that, her character's been a little more, I guess, ballsy.
Right.
A little bit more like what she wants.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
now she's able to express herself more, and I think it's very therapeutic.
That's so nice to hear. Honestly, like I'm someone who dives really deep into psychology and trying to improve as a person and improve on our weaknesses and stuff. And absolutely, yeah, that's just a perfect example of what I said. Like that, it can be therapeutic. It can be help you grow. Essentially, that's really dope.
Oh yeah, and I mean, it's helped me out too because I've had a lot of personal problems with people. Like just being around people's a big problem for me still, but not as big as excuse me, as what it has been.
Right.
And since I loved the game so much, when my friend left it and he's just like, I just can't do it anymore. Becoming a DM, my group grew from just 3 players, and then it shrank to 2, and then the next campaign it went to about 6.
Wow.
And then the next one it went to 8.
That's
and
a
then
lot.
something happened where all the characters had a weird falling out, so that and it kind of worked out because like the other players they were like, we can't do it anymore, our work schedule messed up, but it worked out just fine to where it was like, you know what, our characters hate you and our characters hate you.
Right. You have to. It's like whenever you're kind of writing a show and like some real world shit happens to the actors, and you have to kind of like write it in.
This was just something I could not write. It was just something that happened. Like I set it up to where they could take on these monster hunting quests, and they were going after whatever was causing the disappearance of 12 elven females, and they were going to an old hag's house, and this old hag had been taking care of these goblins and hobgoblins, and there was just one little red-headed bastard, and I specifically say bastard because this was just a little shit. And he was a half-elfin boy, and he would tell tall tales and lie about how his parents abused him when he's really just a runaway, and everyone's just tired of his shit.
Right.
Well, half the group was like, you know what, let's try and help this kid come to terms and go back home, even though he's not the main issue, and try and get some information out of this hag who was pretty friendly. Well, while they were in there, the other 4 were hanging outside, and one of them, he was just a little, he was a pain in the ass. He's one of those players that's a pain in the ass. Every time he plays, something crazy happens.
Right.
And he's like, aren't witches evil? And one of them was just like, yeah. It's like, aren't goblins evil? It's like, yeah. Okay. Sets the hut on fire.
Oh, nice.
Like, locks the door, blocks it off, sets the hut on fire.
Damn, that's savage.
Well, with the other characters in there.
Wow.
And then, like, the other 3 characters were just like, you know what? I like this guy.
As they're burning? As they're burning in the house?
As the other 4 are inside. The other 4 are like, what's that smell? And then the hag thinks, like, hey, you're trying to kill me. And then, like, differentiates through some persuasion rolls and everything. Like, hey, they're not trying to kill me, but get the fuck out of my house.
Right. But
pushes them out of the house. And the house, a fun lore fact in the Monster Manual is that hags usually have houses that do weird shit.
Right.
This one happened to have chicken legs.
Okay.
And I know that sounds pretty dumb, but it fits the lore and it makes it interesting because no one expected that.
Exactly.
And the dude that set the fire to the house, I was just like, I need you to make a dexterity roll. And he's like, okay. And I was like, all right, you roll. He's like, I got a 4. I was like, okay. Roll the hit. Like, it was a nat 20 or something. Like, yeah, it was a nat 20. Foot comes crushing down on top of him. They were like level 3, so hit points are not that high. Crushes him. His character is dead.
Right.
Like, dead and gone. You have a building stomping on you.
Sounds like a cartoon, yeah.
yeah, it was a cartoon death, and then like the other players are like, oh shit,
He's
and
dead.
then
Yeah.
he's dead. The other four players were just like, whatever. He tried setting us on fire. Fuck him.
Right.
And then there's this whole drama of like these four characters now got to confront these other three because these other three were cheering on the dude that tried killing them. And it was just this back and forth, and I was just like, you can't write this.
No, you can't.
And
You can't. It's organic. It's it's too complex to try to map that out.
it was way too complex, and I was just like, I'm sitting there literally with the face of like, man, I wanted character interactions, and I did not prepare for this level of it.
You know what that reminds me of is like so my background started out in drawing and art, and like whenever you're trying to draw anatomy and stuff, you use references because a lot of times your brain just can't generate that, and it sounds like the same exact thing when you're trying to generate storylines and you're trying to generate character interaction and dialogue. It's just what's the best way to do it. Let's just role play. That's awesome.
Yeah, like I'll write out a few lines that I think might work, and I can throw in there for like the bad guys and
Some
whatnot.
general ideas, yeah.
A general, like here's a little bit of a monologue, but then I'll write insert banter. Like if you ever happen to look through like my campaign books, where I'm sorry if you ever have to read that because my handwriting's all over the place. Um, it'll say a few lines and then like insert banter, and that's where I give myself this moment to breathe and react.
Right.
In a good example is our this campaign. There's temples popping up. There's a cult popping up, but it doesn't seem like much of a threat until like our party gets wrapped into it, and this being puts these rings on them, and they're like, we can't take these rings off. It's extraordinarily painful, and like one of the characters like, what if I chop my finger off? And I was just like, it'll still be on you.
Right.
You're just not gonna like where it goes.
That's funny.
And they're like, God, we can't get these rings off, and they still haven't caught on to what it is. We're like 6 months into this campaign. No, way longer than that, 8 months. They still haven't figured it out. And they get to the main bad guy, or one of, I should say, because they haven't gotten far enough to understand what's really going on, bigger picture.
Right.
But a main antagonist, his name's Davos, and I had him stand there. Yeah, I made sure he was pretty weak, that because we have an archer who's like min-maxing. He's having real fun with it. He says, "Fuck this dude," shoots him. Dude's like kind of hurt, and I was just like, "You just shot the boss of all these cultists who can cast spells."
Oh shit.
And they were just like lighting them up, and Davos like just waved them off, and it's just like, you know what? I'm gonna give you a chance. I know all these guys can kill you right here, right now. I need you to stay out of my way and never return. And you can walk through that door.
Damn.
And like, it really conflicted with a lot of them because some of their characters are just like, you know what? I'm not giving this up. You got to go down. You're the bad guy. Can't do this.
Right.
Whoops, covering up my camera.
It's all
Sorry.
good.
And it conflicted really bad with one of them because he's just like, my character hates that. I personally hate that. I had to do that. And I remember one of them, Paige, he turns and he's just like, we gotta live to fight another day. If we're gonna live, we have to agree to not see this dude again.
Right.
And that's when he's like, I throw my hands up and I tell him, I'm not fighting, I just want to live. And that's when the bad guy was just like, that's a smart choice. Go on. Escape with your leg between your legs while you still can.
Right.
And I could just see in his eye, he's like, I have to eat my pride just to make sure my character lives.
Interesting.
While
Wow.
the other ones are just like sitting there and like awestruck, like I can't believe you did that. We're the heroes. We have to beat him. We have to figure this out.
Right, but sometimes it's just a real, like Game of Thrones, like does versus like a lot of shows don't do. Is like sometimes there's real situations and it doesn't always play out perfectly. It's not always the hero doesn't always like beat the bad guy and win, save the day.
Not you don't always get to win the way you want,
Yeah,
and that's what that interaction really was. It was to teach them sometimes it's better to retreat.
yeah, I love
It's
that.
okay to lose the battle in order to win the war.
And that's another example of how you can really grow as a person through these challenges. Like someone who's very egotistical and prideful may run into this situation and be like, shit, what would I actually do? Like one, I love. There's all these kind of like hypothetical moral questions that get thrown around, and a lot of people will kind of try to grapple with them, but at the end of the day, they may just walk away. But if you're sitting here and you're invested in this world, you're invested in this character, you're in the middle of the situation, and then you are presented with this challenge, then like it puts you in that situation, and I think you actually will grow and learn from it based on what you do.
Yeah, and it really worked for our other friend Reese, the one that had a huge problem with it because he's ex-military. He's always been taught, like do not retreat, go forward in the battle, all this stuff.
Right.
And he's like, I have a huge problem with this. I would never do that in real life. I was like, yeah, but you were outnumbered. You were outnumbered, outgunned.
I mean, you could die if you want, yeah.
And it's like you could have gone out a martyr, but it would have been for nothing. He's like, yeah, I understand that now. Like he's like looking back on it, I understand. And it goes back to what you're saying. It's very therapeutic and it helps people, and that's what I love the most. A lot of people still look on this game and go, like, you're a bunch of nerds that they're playing a numbers game, a math game.
Right.
It's like it doesn't have to be math. It doesn't have to be that. It can be situational. It can be pure. It can be like another system like World of Darkness, where they literally have it to where you can switch off from DM to DM each session, or you can keep one DM, but other characters build it as you play, and you don't even have to use dice. You can just be like, well, what would I do?
Exactly, and that's my approach. Is just what would I do? What would happen? Like, what do we think? Like, and usually that works. Like, usually you can get a pretty good idea just intuitively of how it would play out.
Oh yeah, and that's what makes it even more exciting. Is like I want you to think what your character would do, not what you would do, what your character would do.
Right, and that can be a challenge, yeah.
That's a huge challenge. Is like, what does your character believe in? Okay, believes in this. Do what your character believes in, not what you believe in.
Right, and yeah, that can definitely be. Like, yeah, I definitely think that could be challenging, like trying to step outside of yourself, and that's an exercise in empathy there. And it also, it's just an intellectual challenge altogether, a creative challenge. Hell yeah.
Yeah, it's fun, and another thing that happened in the game, and it was during the intro of the game, pretty much. They were framed for like the disappearance of like 37 some odd people, and they were just like, but we didn't do anything. And it's like, well, until this investigation's over, we have to keep you at this pretty much a safe house because we can't prove that you are guilty, but we can't prove that you're innocent. So you'll be under watch of one of our top guards. Well, as they're under watch, I forget what it was, but it was a pretty bad monster. I remember it was like some monster of Orcus or whatever. And there was another problem going on where this kid got possessed, and it was just like this demon, not demon, it was something wraith. Yeah, well, we'll go with wraith. It was a wraith that got attached to this demon, not demon, child, and they were like, we had some of those new players, is back when we had 8 people.
Right.
And one of them was a Goliath barbarian. Of course, he's like, I'm gonna kill it.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, don't kill the damn child. He's like, well, what do I do? And it's like, we don't have a paladin, we don't have a cleric, so what do we do?
Right.
Well, then on the other side, you have this thing. I want to say it starts with a B, but it was just a servant of Orcus, and it could literally like give you a death stare and like just kill you. You're dead if you
Right.
fail to save. Well, one of them was just like, fuck this. We need 3 people on them, and the rest of you go deal with the demon child that's literally crawling through the air ducts and twisting its head around.
That sounds funny.
So 4 of these people are chasing down a child who can tear their arm off and beat them to death with it, while the other 3 are just like, okay, ready your weapons and hope we kill it.
Right.
Well, they succeed on that through the luck of the dice. Literally, just luck of the dice got them through that.
Right.
They're like, okay, that's good. They're like, how's the other group handling it? Well, the Goliath was like, fuck this, and just bisected the child.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it was a dark moment. Like, a lot of them were just like, why would you do that? Why did you do that?
Right.
And he's just like, because it was attacking us.
Hulk smash.
And they're like, do you have any clue what they're going to think whenever they see this? That we were defending ourselves? No, they're going to see a bisected child and then look at you and go like, man, you must have made 37 people disappear.
Right, yeah. It's like, no, trust me. It's totally unrelated. Like, the child's in half, but we're innocent of this crime. So. Yeah, good luck with that. Have you ever had like a court case, like a trial scenario?
There was a trial scenario in there. There was like 3 different trials, but what really tied it together was that the dude that was watching over them, his name was Thorin, and he was the brother to Davos. Well, it revealed that Thorin was part of this cult that was coming up, and they were like, wait a minute, why would a servant of Orcus be coming here? And then they were like piecing it all together, and they found like his journal, and they're like, oh wow, okay, this starts to make sense. This guy was bad.
Right.
This guy was the problem.
Interesting.
And it opened up a doorway to the rest of the story, and there's a lot to it.
Absolutely, it sounds like it. It sounds dope. One thing I had thought about was, and one challenge that I ran into as a DM that I wanted to kind of get into is, how do you kind of balance freedom and kind of winging it in general versus this kind of script that you had going into it? Because I noticed sometimes I would have like something that I wanted to happen. I wanted to kind of guide the players towards this experience, and sometimes they would make a decision that would completely just, like, you know, I would create like 20 minutes worth of content, and they would just be like, I'm going to go this way. And I'm like, fuck, like, you know, how do you deal with that?
The method that I came up with, and some of the players I've been playing with for quite a while. So, I kind of know what they're going to do. But I always go by what my mom's always taught me. Expect the unexpected.
Right.
And that's kind of hard to do whenever you do, play this game, because you have wild cards. People are going to throw you for a loop.
Right.
And it's rough. It's pretty rough whenever you're trying to do this. So what I do is I do encounter to encounter, but I leave pathways that I think they might go.
Right.
And a prime example, there was a chance that they would not understand nor get the fact that Thorin is part of this cult, and I left it there.
Right.
And I had a pathway that was like, if Thorin lives and isn't found out. There was also if Thorin lives but is found out, and then there was the total, like, they don't find out anything. Because there's always going to be the chance to roll the dice, like, you don't find shit. You don't do shit.
Right. Yeah, that's so interesting. Like, you do have to kind of wing it, but if you need to have some stuff prepared so you're not, like, completely thrown around. That's really interesting.
And a lot of it I build encounters and I build a scenario. I'm pretty sure this podcast isn't going to be seen by them until after, because I'm going to get the link to
Oh,
your
you
podcast.
don't want to spoil it. No spoilers for the campaign. What's
No
gonna
spoilers
happen?
for them. No spoilers for them. But I'll go ahead and tell you, they're already in a place called Marquette, in the city of Ankara, and have it to where this fire giant has been on the prime material plane, and he is serving Orcus to an extent.
Right.
Well, he's going to show up at the city, and he's going to ask for the Sultan, I guess that would be the correct term, Jaman Saord, for his daughter in a political marriage. And I made it to where you don't like this guy because he keeps calling his daughter a crossbreed, and I'm going to keep alluding to that for my characters, so that they're like, well, what is she half of? Because this dude's clearly human when he's actually like a dragon.
Oh
It's
shit.
like she's a crossbreed. She's half human, half dragon, and that's why the fire giant wants her, and also is causing all these problems. And this will lead to the other temple in the story. Now, there's a lot of stuff they can do. They can either politically handle this to where it's like, hey, you can back off. We can take care of your problem with Davos and the um, the God's Head, which is the actual main bad guy of the story, and we can, settle it politically.
Yeah.
Or we can cut your head off, take your head back, and be on our merry way.
Or that. Either way.
So, leaving that option there is something I strive for, because I want my characters to feel free, like they can go and do what they want when they want.
Right.
But I like to leave a little bit of this impending doom. It's like this anxiety, like we got to get something done.
Right.
Because if you don't have that urgency, then your characters are just going to be like, well, there's no point in playing this.
Right.
Why are we here?
Right. I feel that.
So the best thing I find is write your encounters out, or your places, wherever your scenarios are going to take place. And then gauge your players. And I usually say, write a very linear intro that builds up to the main story. And then after you've done that, you can kind of gauge your players and go like, okay, we got the lawful good guy who's going to be like, no, we got to do this right. You got your chaotic, neutral, I do what I want guy. You got, your indifferent guys. You got all these people, and you can gauge them a little bit better. So then write out your places and what can happen in these places. And write out points of interest that, can be roles. Like, roll a history check to see what is in this city and what's happened in this city. You can roll a survival check to see where, the nearest tavern is and where you can find good food and all this stuff. And it really engages the player, and that's the key thing, is to engage your player and make it feel like this world's open, I can do what I want, but I still kind of have to adhere to it.
Right. Yeah, so that's kind of where the balance is to be found. Hell yeah.
So that's what I try to strive for. I'm in control, but I'm only in control of the world.
Right.
You're in control of your characters. You do what you want.
And it's kind of reactive in that. You kind of let them take the first step, and you say like, kind of, here's what happens. I like that.
Well, thanks. And like my friend Tyler Page, and he's one of our players. I call him Page because our other friend Reese, his name's Tyler Reese, so we kind of have to call him by their last name.
Right.
Page, he's a very linear storyteller. He tells you what's going to happen, where it's going to happen, and all this stuff, and it's still fun.
Right.
It's just you and your players have to understand what kind of setting it is.
Right.
If it's linear, it's linear. If it's not, then you all need to understand that. in making a very I won't say non-linear, an exponential. There we go. An exponential, exponentially growing story.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to be like, there's 5 temples in this world, and we got to shut them all down. Doesn't matter what order, but we have a month to do it. How are we going to do it?
Right. So you set some constraints up. Okay.
Yeah. Basically, you've built the sandbox. Here's what's in the sandbox. You have a time limit. Figure it out.
Hell yeah. So
you gotta think of it like an escape room. There we go. That's the analogy I was looking for.
An escape room. Yeah. Okay. I like that. So I guess it gives me this has really accomplished a lot of what I had hoped to do with this kind of podcast, like kind of get a glimpse into, just really a closer glimpse into what it's like to play, what it's like to DM, some of the challenges, some of the benefits of it, and I think you've definitely carried us through that. I definitely I hope that this kind of serves to kind of just popularize it in general, give people exposure. And if anybody has any questions about, kind of getting started and stuff, I think you'd be a great resource for that if you're down to kind of help new DMs.
Oh, yeah, I'm always down to help people. Like, I love D&D a lot, and like my group kind of hates it because I'll always be like, hey, we have room for like 2 more people, and I'll sometimes ask people like, hey, if you want to join, come hang out with us. We'll play.
Or you can just kind of watch the first time, or just kind of spectate, if you want.
Yeah, and it's just like, come on, man, stop inviting all these people.
Right, it just keeps growing. But yeah, that's what it's all about. I would love to see the community grow. I'd love to stay in touch. I'd love to hear more about how your characters kind of go. Like if you're ever interested in writing some of that stuff out and whatnot, or maybe doing some series of your own or filming, any of that would be cool.
I thought about it, and then my laptop literally died. The hard drive froze on it, so I lost like so much on my computer, like not just D&D stuff, but like music I wrote, art, everything. It was awful.
That sounds like so painful. Damn, fucking hard drives, man. Fucking technology. Yeah. Hell yeah. So I guess I was thinking about kind of wrapping it up here. I think we've covered a lot of bases. I really appreciate you kind of coming on and giving us kind of a glimpse of your world and the experience altogether. Is there anything you wanted to kind of throw out before we kind of close out here?
The only thing I can say is, if you have ever considered D&D, don't let the math and the creation scare you.
Yeah.
Just treat it like Grand Theft Auto. That's pretty much what you need to do.
Grand Theft Auto roleplay. Next episode.
Pretty much.
Hell yeah.
Well, if you want that, go with Shadowrun, but that's a different story.
Right. Yeah. Maybe we'll do another episode where we talk about some different campaigns and stuff like that. But I guess that's definitely a good closing out point for today, I guess. I appreciate you coming on again, man.
No, thank you. And you have a good day, all right, man?
Hell yeah, you too. Good talking, man. I'll follow up with you.
All right, later.
Peace.